Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday evening. It is Tuesday, right? Yeah, it's Tuesday. Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Bryan Schott, and I am the publisher and managing editor, founding editor of Utah Political Watch. That is an independent journalism site here in Utah. You can find us online at utahpolitics.news. Can you tell I'm excited for the World Cup wearing my Scotland soccer jersey? This is from Euros last year, 2025 or maybe 2024. Yeah, 2024 Euro. I've got a new one on the way, coming on the way, the new away jersey. But yeah, I'm excited for the World Cup that's going to start on Thursday. Going to try to watch as many of those matches as I can, because I am a longtime soccer degenerate. We got all sorts of stuff going on in politics, and I want to talk with you. Ryan Hi-Fi says, "What's up, Brian? What's up with you?" Ryan Hi-Fi, appreciate you joining tonight. We got a lot to chat about. The primaries are 2 weeks away, 2 weeks from tonight. Actually, in about 2 weeks and 26 minutes, we'll start to get the first results to roll in from the primary elections. If you are a member, if you are a subscriber to Utah Political Watch, we are running a contest. I'm running a contest. We're calling it the Primary Election Pick'em, and looking to see if you can pick the winners of all 24 primaries for the state legislature and Congress. The person who gets the most, I'm going to get you a trophy. I'm having a trophy made, and I will take you to lunch, a moderately priced restaurant of your choice. So you can have lunch with me. That's the prize. But that is a contest only for paying subscribers at Utah Political Watch. So if you want to get in on that, go over to my website, utahpolitics.news, and become a paying subscriber, and you can get in on that contest. But yeah, you can have lunch with me. Also, a little bit of an update, and I'm trying to work on something here. You know, I've got a standing invitation for any member of the legislature to go to a women's sporting match, Utah Royals or the new Utah Talons. That's a new softball team in town. We have a taker. Representative Clint Okerlund. He was on the live stream last week, and he reached out to me and said, let's do this. And so we're going to try to go to a game in July. The Royals are on break for the World Cup right now. We're going to try to go to a game in July, and I'm trying to work things out that maybe we make it so it's not just Representative Okerlund and I. Maybe some of you, maybe some of my viewers, my subscribers can get tickets as well. I'm not buying tickets for you. I can't afford that. But probably I'm trying to see if we can maybe secure a block of tickets for that match, so that we can have a large group there. And as long as people are respectful, we can have a nice time at the soccer pitch and talk a little bit about politics as well. So anyway, that is in the offing right now. That's just some housekeeping stuff. If you have any questions or comments, let me know in the chat, and we can talk about whatever's on your mind tonight. What is on the agenda? We're going to talk about outside money in politics. I've been digging into the outside spending. There's a lot of outside spending that's coming into Utah for the congressional primaries. We can talk about that. Let's talk about Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County suing the Department of Homeland Security to block the detention center. We can the ICE detention center. We can talk about that as well. I'm curious your thoughts about Governor Spencer Cox declaring June as Fidelity Month rather than Pride Month. Just the latest move in his long drift towards the right, which is very interesting given that this is a man who was, got a lot of national acclaim for the speech he gave at an event honoring the victims of the Pulse nightclub shooting back, I believe that was 2018 maybe. He gave a very moving speech there, and now he seems to have shifted in the other direction. So I want to get your thoughts on that. We can talk about Senator Mike Lee, his push, his anger at the Department of Defense after they originally gave a list of recognized religions that happened late last week and over the weekend, and it did not classify the LDS Church as a Christian religion. Senator Mike Lee was not happy about that. He posted dozens of times to try to get that change, and eventually it did change, but probably not in the way that he was hoping. I don't want to get your thoughts on that. My, I guess initial take about that is Senator Mike Lee has shown us that he can get things done when he wants to. He has the ability to get some things done when he wants to. It's just pretty clear he doesn't want to sometimes. So all of that is fair game. B. Morelli or B. Morale on TikTok says that was a distraction while they effectively merged our military with Israel's military. Maybe, possibly. But when you have a Secretary of Defense who has what can be described as Christian nationalist tattoos, I don't think that you should be surprised. To me, I don't think that it wasn't a surprising development for me. And just read Project 2025, and you'll get an idea of why that move was made by the Department of Defense. I don't want to get bogged down in a religious discussion here. I thought the move by the Department of Defense was wrong. I thought the attempt to reclassify everything or reclassify the religions was wrong and misguided. But there's a lot of stuff happening in Utah politics. I want to start off with this. We're going to talk about the amount of outside spending that is coming into Utah's congressional primaries. 2.8 million, more than 2.8 million. As of today, I've been trying to track this. I put some trackers up on the website, utahpolitics.news. You can look and see who these outside groups are that are spending in our elections. They are pouring money into these races. And up until today, most of the money, the large amount of money, was going into the CD3 race between Celeste Malloy and Phil Lyman. A lot of that money was coming in from a super PAC that is controlled by Chris Stewart, who just happens to be Celeste Malloy's former boss, which is not surprising at all that Chris Stewart would be backing his former employee in that race. But that was until today. Today, and a group called the New Democrats Coalition, I believe is what it is, the New Democrat Majority, which is the political arm of the New Democrat Coalition in Congress. And that is a moderate centrist group of Democrats. They just dropped $1 million, $1 million ad buy and production, $1 million for ads in this race to support Ben McAdams in the 1st Congressional District. There's been over $1.5 million from outside spending that has come into the 1st Congressional District, and all of it has been in support of Ben McAdams. When these outside groups, when they make an independent expenditure in these races, they have to report with the FEC. They have to say, we are spending this amount of money, and they have to say whether they are supporting or opposing a candidate. And all of the money, the $1.549 million that has dropped into that 1st Congressional District race so far from outside groups, has been in support of Ben McAdams. They have to report that. It's not illegal for them to spend this money. The only legal requirement is they cannot coordinate with candidates. So candidates can't tell them what the message is, or they can't coordinate messaging, they can't coordinate timing. These groups just make those buys for people that they want, for candidates that they want to support. And all of the money so far that has come in has been in support of Ben McAdams. And there's another big ad buy that's coming in next week from a group called the Think Big PAC, and that is a pro-AI group. They are funded or linked to OpenAI, Palantir, and Andreessen Horowitz. They have reserved, they haven't spent the money yet, but they have reserved $450,000 in advertising in support of McAdams, and that is scheduled for next week. So if that money comes in, it will be almost $2 million of outside money that has come into this race in support of Ben McAdams, which is the most for any candidate. And that makes sense because in all of these races, the primary is pretty much the entire ball game. Whoever wins the primary is most likely going to win in November. Told you before that CD1 is not an overwhelmingly Democratic race. It's not a Democratic district. Democrats still are the third largest voting bloc behind independents and Republicans. But this district has shown that the independents there and even some of the Republicans will vote for a Democrat when it comes down to it. So that's why they're pouring this money in. And the money is coming in support of Ben McAdams. And I really haven't seen any indication that there's going to be outside money for other candidates up until this point. That's where a lot of this money, that's the most amount of money that's been coming into these races. The second most amount of money, and we mentioned a little bit, is in Congressional District 3. It's just over $1.15 million. Most of that is going to support Celeste Malloy. A big chunk of that is from this group called Defending Our Values PAC. That is a super PAC that is run by Chris Stewart, former Representative Chris Stewart, who, if you'll remember, he resigned suddenly in 2023, and Celeste Malloy, who was a lawyer in his office, jumped into that race, and now he's backing her. So this Defending Our Values PAC is connected to this organization called Public First Action. And that is an organization Stewart launched last year with Oklahoma Democrat from Congress, Brad Carson. So Stewart has his PAC is called Defending Our Values. There is a Democratic PAC that is basically controlled by Carson, and they support Democrats, and they also have a PAC that is more bipartisan. Now this group is funded a big chunk of their money has come from Anthropic. They're the people who make Claude AI. They are actually pushing for more safeguards and more regulation on AI. The group that has a big ad buy coming in next week in support of Ben McAdams, it is that group, the Think Big PAC. They are linked, they're the other big AI outside spending group, and they advocate for fewer regulations on AI. That's the open AI side of it. But Chris Stewart's group, which got a big chunk of money from Anthropic, they push for more regulation on AI, more safeguards. And that makes sense because that's Anthropic, that's one of the reasons they got into that fight with the Department of Defense, because they wanted safeguards in place if the DoD was going to be using their AI. And that's why they got banned by the government at first. So they push for more regulations on AI. And so that is the group that has dropped the most money in support of Celeste Malloy in CD3. There's a couple of other groups. There's the WFW Action Fund. It's the Women for Women Action Fund. They're a PAC that works to elect Republican women to Congress. And then they also have a group called ACPAC, which is American Conservation Coalition. And they are an environmental group, but they're more in favor of free market solutions to environmental protections, not the heavy hand of government. So that's the groups who are coming in and mostly supporting Celeste Malloy. There's one other group that is spending in this race, and they go by the name the Defending Utah Values Federal Super PAC. And that is a PAC. They've also got a local organization here, and it is run by a gentleman who is a very close ally of Governor Spencer Cox. His name is Owen Fuller. He used to be the CEO of Lucid, I believe, the tech company. Anyway, he's got Defending Utah Values Federal Super PAC, which spends on these federal races. He's also got Defending Utah Values here in Utah, and they are just spamming Facebook with ads in favor of some candidates. And then there's another group that he's affiliated called All In for Utah, and they're also working on local races and promoting candidates. But they're spending in this this race, they've spent about $20,000 to oppose Phil Lyman. They also got involved in the CD2 race, but those are the three groups that are involved in the CD3 race. In the CD2 race, as we talked about last week, there is a group called Defending Conservative Values PAC, and I did some sleuthing, and it's pretty likely that that PAC is attached at least or connected to Dan Houser, who is the political director for Senator Mike Lee. He's been a longtime ally of Senator Mike Lee. They're doing most of the spending in this race. There was a group called the Center Forward Initiatives. That is a centrist group. They have spent money in support of Blake Moore, but all of the other money has mostly been in opposition to Blake Moore. Although that Defending Utah Values federal PAC, which I told you about a minute ago, which is run by Owen Fuller, they just made a $10,000 buy in this race, $5,000 in support of Blake Moore, and then $5,000 opposing Carrie Ann Lisenby. So far in this race has been about $218,000 of outside spending, $104,000 in support of Blake Moore, $109,000 opposing Blake Moore, and $5,000 opposing Carrie Ann Lisenby. So that's the outside spending that's been coming down in this race so far as we get closer and closer to the primary. Ryan Hi-Fi on TikTok says, Malloy and Lyman, that's like picking up a turd from the least stinky end. I'm not going to comment on that. You can certainly have your thoughts about where we stand with that race. As I've said before, and I'm trying to work on a breakdown right now, it is entirely possible that Phil Lyman could win that race. Do not count him out, because there's a whole bunch of Republican voters in that district who have not seen Celeste Malloy on a ballot. This is the crazy stat of the week, though. Celeste Malloy has not served a full term in Congress. Remember, she finished out Chris Stewart's term when she was first elected in 2023. So she finished out his term, and then she got reelected in 2024, and her first full term started in 2025. She's not all the way through her first full term, and this is her fifth election. She had the primary in the general election in 2023, the primary in the general election in 2024. She's in a primary again, and if she advances, she'll have the general election. So that'll be 6 elections before she ever finishes her first term in Congress. And if Phil Lyman knocks her out, it will be her last term in Congress. And like I said, I think that it is entirely possible that Lyman could win that race. I don't think it's for sure. Lyman is I'd be really fascinated to see how much money he's raising. He's spending a lot of his resources on social media and Facebook and meeting with people, but he did not file a required FEC filing right before convention like he was supposed to, and that's because he claims he did not raise or spend $5,000. So he didn't raise or spend enough to have to file with the FEC. I'm pretty sure he's done so now, and we're supposed to be getting those pretty quickly. I'll have to look and see what the actual deadline on that is. Actually, it's this week, so hopefully we will start seeing those pre-primary reports, and then we'll get a better idea of where these people are in their fundraising. So I'll be fascinated to see that. Remember, none of this is illegal. The only restriction is they can't coordinate with candidates. And I can't really say for sure, but there's a lot of times where one group is, sometimes these organizations, in fact, I know in one case here in Utah, a couple of years ago, there was a federal candidate and a super PAC that popped up to support them was just down the hall, but they're not supposed to coordinate. I'm not going to say who that was, but this is all because of Citizens United that allows these 501c4 groups to spend on elections and advocate for the election or the defeat of a candidate. And, as of next week, it's going to be almost $2 million in outside spending on this CD1 race. And that's probably as expensive as it's going to get. I remember when Ben McAdams ran against Mia Love the first time around and then Burgess Owens, like that, those were $8 million congressional campaigns. We're not going to get anywhere close to that this time. Riley Owen, who is the Republican nominee in that race, will have some resources, but it's going to be such an uphill battle for them depending on who comes out of the primary. And McAdams is not a lock. He's not a lock at all, because when you have 4 people in the primary, it's all going to come down to turnout. And by turnout, I mean who gets their voters to return their ballots in the mail. I mentioned it's all going to come down to turnout on somewhere, and one of the smooth brains over on X didn't quite understand what I meant by that, saying, doesn't everybody get a ballot in the mail? Not everybody votes, though. Not everybody returns that ballot. If you remember in 2024, the primary election, the turnout was like 46%, or maybe that was the general election, but it was like 46%, which was the turnout for that election. So not everybody returns their ballots. We did have a question in our Discord this week that I thought was very interesting. Somebody asked, are any incumbents at risk of losing their primaries? And I'll tell you the ones that I'm watching right now. The ones that I'm paying attention to, obviously I mentioned CD3, Phil Lyman. He does have a chance to defeat Celeste Malloy. She almost lost the last time around. I think she won her primary by 176 votes. It was 214, and then they did a recount, and she won by 176, I think, is the margin. So she is not a lock. I think that there are some congressional races that could be nail biters. Some legislative races that could be interesting. Obviously, SD7, Senate District 7, Stuart Adams, the data center issue, his work with MITA, that has become a really potent issue. And I don't know how much that's going to play in this race. He's got 2 opponents, not 1, and they might split the not Adams vote. And that might be enough to keep him in there. But I do think that this SD7 is probably one of the most consequential legislative races that we've seen in Utah in a very long time, because you've got the sitting Senate president, and he's clear, at least he thinks he's in trouble. He is not acting like a candidate who is confident about his reelection chances. So that's one that I'm watching. SD14, that is the race between Stephanie Pitcher and Tyler Cater. I can't know how to pronounce his last name. I think that one could be close. Pitcher is the incumbent. A lot of people ask me, why did Pitcher get challenged and forced into this primary? Well, if you remember how she got into the legislature in the first place, she won because there was a vacancy, and she was elected in. She was put in by delegates. I don't know if that race is going to be close. It obviously could be. It's one that I'm going to be watching. Clearly, Senate District 18 is one that's got my attention. That's the Dan McKay and Doug Fiafia race. There's a lot of money flowing into that race, and I don't know if Dan McKay survives that. His legislative career could be over with. And I don't know how popular his name is or how popular he is down in that area of the valley. Fiafia challenged him for a reason, because he saw a vulnerability there, and McKay's wife did not do great in the Riverton mayor election last year. I don't know if we can read anything into that about McKay's chances, but he's clearly got a tough fight on his hand. There are 2 races in the House that I'm really paying attention to where the incumbents could be in trouble. HD 16 for sure. Trevor Lee, he is clearly in a lot of trouble against Bob Stevenson. He's acting like a candidate who knows he's in trouble. And a lot of people I talk to expect him to lose. I don't know if that's how it's going to end up, but it is entirely possible that he loses. And then the other one that I'm paying attention to is HD 44, Jordan Tusher. He could lose to Scott Stevenson. And if he does, it is because of the union busting bill that he sponsored that got repealed after there was a big push by the unions to put it on the ballot. Scott Stevenson is the head of the police union, and he's got a lot of union backing. And Tusher, again, is acting like a candidate who who is in some trouble. So those are the primary elections that I'm watching. Speaking of election night, I'm going to be live on election night. We're probably going to start at the same time, about 7:30. I've already lined up. I'm going to have as a guest a friend of mine, David Neer. He runs the wonderful newsletter called The Down Ballot. And I've known David for years. He used to be the elections guy over at Daily Kos, and then he split off to start the Down Ballot, and he and his small team of people are just killing it. He's going to come on right off the start to do a scene setter to talk about some of these congressional elections. So I'm looking forward to having that, and then we're going to go over a lot of the election results on that evening. On YouTube, Dank, evening Dank, how are you? Dank says Citizens United was a mistake. You got that one right. Citizens United was a massive mistake. I don't know if you've seen what they did in Montana, but they're trying to make it illegal. And I think it's a constitutional amendment making it illegal for corporations to spend on elections in Montana. That's the model for overturning Citizens United, which Citizens United has really corrupted our elections and really made it, it facilitated the flow of all this dark money into our elections. Misty Moon asks, why does the online voting registration let Republicans pick if they want a Democratic primary ballot, but Democrats cannot pick a primary Republican ballot? Just curious if you know. Republicans have what is called a closed primary. You must be a registered Republican if you want to vote in their primary. Democrats have an open primary. Anybody can vote in their primary so long as they don't vote in another primary. You have to vote in one or the other. So Republicans and independents can ask for a Democratic primary ballot, but that means that they can't vote in the Republican primary. That's because the Democrats have an open primary and Republicans have a closed primary. Only Republicans can vote in the Republican primary. Everybody can vote in the Democratic primary as long as that is the only primary that they vote in. I am a registered Republican, but I did request a Democratic ballot this year. Last I checked, there were not very many Republicans who had asked for a Democratic ballot in Salt Lake County. If you're a Republican and you want to get a Democratic ballot, say you want to vote in the CD1 race, you're also voting in every other race in your area. So I will be voting in the Senate District 13 race to replace Nate Bluen. There are 3 candidates on the ballot there, so that's on mine. And I also get a vote in the district attorney primary. That's also there. Let's talk a little bit about the news that Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City are filing suit against the federal government, against the Department of Homeland Security to block the DHS, the ICE detention facility, the warehouse that they purchased in Salt Lake City. Some of the Republicans on the Salt Lake County Council are not happy about that. They were not told in advance about the lawsuit, but I think that it adds an interesting dimension to this proposed detention facility. Ryan Hi-Fi says, my question on that warehouse is, why did DHS pay so much for it? Is that normal? There was a great breakdown by the Building Salt Lake blog that showed that they way overpaid for that. And there's been some more reporting since that some of these the companies who had these properties, and it's happened all over the country, they have massively overpaid for these warehouses. And some of the owners, and I think that is the case here in Salt Lake City, they have connections to the Trump administration. And this is a way to get these properties off of their balance sheets. And it just so happens that they made a little bit in the process. There's been a lot of reporting on that, a lot of speculation that may have been what happened. But yes, they did massively overpay for that warehouse. And it had been on the market for a long time as well. I saw a great comment on social media today. It said, hey, do you remember when warehouses in Utah were only for MLM products and food storage companies? And now apparently it's going to be a massive ICE detention facility, but that's what this lawsuit is challenging. I've seen some Republicans talking about how they were angry about this because it's going to be a lot of money and resources to fight the federal government. But I would think, at least in the case of Salt Lake City, they would have the kind of support that they want, or the kind of support behind them to take this move and file suit and fight this out in court. If you remember, Salt Lake City already took the first move trying to restrict water use, passing an ordinance to restrict water use. Speaking of the Salt Lake City Council, I've been following on social media tonight. They were picking a replacement for Ava Lopez Chavez, who was declared ineligible to hold her seat because she didn't live in the district. Eventually, it came down to a coin flip, and the replacement for her turns out to be Jennifer Napier Pierce, who used to be the top editor at the Salt Lake Tribune until she left all of a sudden to go become a top advisor to Governor Spencer Cox. And then now I think she works for the Eccles Foundation and is now your new Salt Lake City councilwoman. It came down to a coin flip. There's 6 members on the council, and they had a couple of ballots where everybody was 3-3, another tie 3-3. So they eventually had to do a coin flip, and Jennifer Napier Pierce was the winner of that coin flip. So I think that is fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about the media. This has been on my mind for a couple of days now, and not really media. It's more people pretending to be in the media, people who desperately want to be in the media. As you may or may not know, Senator John Johnson has a podcast, and it's not great. It's not a great podcast. I've been very, very critical of it. It is softball question after softball question. He desperately wants to be a media influencer, but it just doesn't work. I think very few people listen to this podcast. I'm one of them because he gets a lot of elected officials on there. And the reason he gets a lot of top elected officials on there is because they know he's not going to ask them tough questions. They're not going to have to defend positions. And this is the perfect example. On his most recent podcast, he had Senate President Stuart Adams on. And I listened to the whole thing, and there was not one question about his MIDA and the Box Elder County Data Center. Not one. Which, okay, he's not a journalist, and he'll be the first one to tell you that he's not a journalist. But you want to know why he didn't ask a single question about that? Because if he does anything to cross Stuart Adams, he's going to find himself off of his covet. He chairs the Senate Education Committee. And if he did something to cross Stuart Adams, if he asked Adams even a mildly difficult question about his role on MIDA and the Box Elder Data Center, he would be off the Senate Education Committee so fast. It would be unbelievably quick. Most of those interviews are useless. It's just basically 2 people patting each other on the back. Why are you awesome? You remember the Chris Farley skit on Saturday Night Live where he would interview celebrities and basically talk about how awesome they were? He has Arnold Schwarzenegger on. He said, "Hey, do you remember that time in The Terminator where you said, 'I'll be back'? That was awesome, man." That's his podcast. No tough questions. It's a forum where these elected officials can come out and basically not be challenged and give the narrative that they want. And boy, was that on display when he had Stuart Adams on. It was really kind of pathetic. It was really bad. But the problem is with these kinds of shows available to them, Stuart Adams is not going to go on a program where he gets challenged. He's just not going to do it. And now he can go on these programs like John Johnson's and know he's not going to face any tough questions and be allowed to say, to put out the narrative that he wants, whatever spin he wants. That's why these exist. And you're seeing these top officials spending more and more time in these friendly environments. That's what's happening. They're going to these friendly podcasts where they know they're not going to get challenged. Nathan Detroit says, "How do you cut taxes and stand up for the working man while looking so heroic?" Johnson, probably. You joke, but that is the kind of question that he asks on this podcast. Don't waste your time listening to it. You don't get anything useful out it. You don't get anything useful about it or out of it. Let me, and then if anything happens, I will let you know. There's also a recent interview with Trevor Lee, where Trevor Lee talks, he basically gets on there and cries about how badly he's treated in the press and how badly he's treated by the media. The problem is he doesn't really talk to the media and doesn't want to get challenged, even though he claims that he is very accessible. Jaden Weeks, great question. This is something I wanted to get to. Thoughts on Aaron Davidson and Kai Schwimmer. If you don't know, Aaron Davidson, the Utah County Clerk, who is in a really tough re-election battle, has appointed Kai Schwimmer, who is he's like the political director for the College Republicans of America. He's a college student here in Utah. I think this is a major problem. He's appointed him as the deputy election director. And I think this is a major problem because Kai Schwimmer is dangerous. And he's dangerous because he's a groyper. And he's an admitted groyper. Groyper, if you don't know what that is a white supremacist follower or a follower of white supremacist Nick Fuentes, who is a Christian nationalist and a white supremacist. And it's pretty clear. I mean, Kai Schwimmer he sees himself as an up-and-comer. He's very ambitious politically. He ran for the open job with the Republican Party as treasurer. He got slaughtered in the election by the state central committee. They elected someone else, which good on them. They didn't elect a 22-year-old college kid to be their treasurer. Kai Schwimmer is a streamer. I'm trying to explain this for people who aren't as terminally online as I am. Nick Fuentes, who, as I said, is a far-right white supremacist and Christian nationalist, and he doesn't shy away from those beliefs. He has a channel called Cozy TV, and it is invite only. You can only have a show on this Cozy TV if Nick Fuentes invites you, and Kai Schwimmer has or had a show on this invite only. He's now the political director for the College Republicans of America. If you go to their website, he's actually crowdfunding right now to raise money to build a podcast studio for them, a streaming studio for the College Republicans. Gee, I wonder if it seems a little self-serving, but anyway. So he has been appointed as a deputy elections director for Utah County. Utah County's elections traditionally do not run smoothly. They did run smoothly when Amelia Powers Gardner was in charge of that, but she's now on the council, and Aaron Davidson is now the clerk. And they had some problems in 2024, the election that he ran, and now he has appointed someone with zero experience in this, who is a nakedly political person, to help oversee these elections. That should raise some alarm bells. I'm not saying that Aaron Davidson who is an election denier. He can do whatever he wants with that office, but I think that there should be a lot of attention paid to anything that they do. I don't think that they should be given the benefit of the doubt at all, given their background. Aaron Davidson, election denier, conspiracy theorist, you name it, he's been involved in those conspiracy theories surrounding the election, vaccines, what have you. So I think anything that he does should be viewed with either suspicion or scrutiny. I think it should be setting off alarm bells for everyone, given Kai Schwimmer's background. Tolerate on Instagram says he's also racist and misogynist. Yeah, you're talking about Nick Fuentes, who, he's not a great person. Nathan Detroit asks, is Susan Lee running for Davis County Commissioner related to Trevor Lee? That's Trevor Lee's mom. That is Trevor Lee's mother. Funny thing, I was told by someone up in Davis County. A couple of weekends ago, there was a meeting for all of the candidates to come and talk to the Davis County Republican Party Central Committee. And if you know anything about how these Republican parties are set, the central committees are the ones who call the shots. And there's usually a fierce fight to get on the state central committee and the county central committee. So they had a meeting a couple of weeks ago where all the candidates were supposed to come and talk. Trevor Lee skipped that meeting, which I found ironic because he was attacking Bob Stevenson, his opponent, for not going to a debate that was sponsored by the Davis County Conservatives, which is a group of the most far-right members of the Davis County Republican Party. Bob was out of the country, but Trevor Lee had been attacking him for not showing up to this candidate forum, but then he did not show up for the meeting with the Davis County Republican Party Central Committee. Bob Stevenson, who had just had surgery on either his foot or his leg, did show up. I was also told that Susan Lee showed up and did not mention her son once. The person described it to me as it sounded like she was trying to distance herself from her son. And someone also said that there's just not, at least from their impression, there's not a lot of enthusiasm for Susan Lee's campaign, but I could be wrong. But we'll see how that plays out. Hestolerate. I can't pronounce your username on Instagram. Says, no, I'm talking about Kai. Kai is racist AF. Yes, there's a lot of information. I've got a very long file on Kai Schwemmer. And yeah, he has said some very racist things. But now he is among he's got some of the levers of power, at least in Utah County, because he was appointed as an assistant election director by Aaron Davidson, who I said is having a very tough re-election bid. Nathan Detroit says, so Trevor isn't getting the #1 son in Davis County award again this year. Well, his mom did give him an award at last year's Davis County Republican Party Lincoln Day dinner for Legislator of the Year, but I think that they're trying to do whatever they can to try and soften his image ahead of this election. Dollar Day on Instagram says, it's Elvish, my man. I know you'll appreciate that. Okay. I will give you that to you. I don't speak Elvish. Once I thought I wanted to try and learn Klingon once, and then I thought better of it. Way back in college is when people just started to learn Klingon. I thought I wanted to do that, but I ended up not doing that. So, but good on you. Is that from the Lord of the Rings? I should probably reread that book again. Reread those books. I used to read those like once every 3 or 4 years, but I haven't read them in a long time. There's a lot of books that I want to go back and reread. I just haven't had time to do that. Grandma Debus, I believe is your name on Instagram, says, what do you know about Carrie Ann Lisenby? She's a current member of the legislature. She has been there. I think she was first elected in 2016 or 2018. She replaced Kurt Oda, who retired, and she rose up to become one of the top Republicans in the House. She was the House Majority Whip for a while until the House Majority Leader stepped down, and she ran for that job against Casey Snyder. Casey Snyder ended up winning, and she had to give up her position in leadership. So she was out of leadership, but she was one of the more powerful members of the legislature for years. I think that her problem right now is that, and I've said this before, nobody knows who the hell she is. But having a seat in the legislature does not mean that you have a lot of visibility. Just look at the speakers of the House who have tried to run for higher office. Brad Wilson ran for U.S. Senate. He didn't get anywhere. Ended up third in that primary, spent $6 million of his own money. Marty Stevens ran for governor. He didn't work out for him. Someone put it to me, the titles in the legislature, the titles that people have on the Hill are very important to everybody else on the Hill. And then when you get 3 blocks away from the Hill, nobody cares. And so her problem is that nobody really knows who she is, and she doesn't have the resources to get her name ID up. When you run for office and a larger office than state legislature, you either have name ID or you spend money to get name ID. She doesn't have name ID, and she doesn't have the money to get name ID. And grassroots organizing and door knocking can only go so far in a congressional district. When you're coming from a state legislative district, her last two elections, she was unopposed. She did not have to campaign at all to win those seats. And now she's in a congressional primary against someone who's been in three primaries previously, has all the money in the world, and is a member of Republican leadership in the House of Representatives. That's a real tough ask. Question: what do you think about Nate Bluen? He says, dude seems to have gone off the deep end, calling people like Eli McCann and Elevate Utah operatives for Ben McAdams. I just think that we're in the part of the campaign where people are voting. They are returning their ballots. And I think Nate has diagnosed the problem in this race, at least for him, correctly. And that is, there are three candidates running as progressives. They are running in the progressive lane. Him, Liban Muhammad, and Michael Farrell. And he had that gambit a couple of weeks ago where he tried to get the others to drop out and get behind him, because he released that poll showing that he was, 10 points behind McAdams. But if you add up all of the candidates who are not McAdams, they have more support than Ben McAdams. And I think he has correctly diagnosed this situation. And unless something changes, he might be staring at a loss. I don't know. Again, you've got four people in this race. And so anything can happen. It's all going to come down to which voters are going to return their ballots, which of your supporters return your ballots. You better hope that more of your supporters return their ballots than for the other guys. And he's also looking at the resources that McAdams has that he does not. And as I've said before, the difference between having money and not having money is running the kind of race you want to run versus the kind of race you are forced to run. And McAdams has resources. He has money. And so he is running the kind of race he wants to run. Bluen does not have those resources. McAdams is up on TV. He's got outside groups coming in and spending on his behalf and putting ads on TV. Nate Bluen is not. Liban Muhammad is not. Michael Farrell is not. And it's really hard to break through when you do not have the kind of advantages that McAdams has. Does this mean that McAdams is going to win? No, it does not. But it means that he's in a better position than Bluen. And like I said, I think Bluen has accurately diagnosed the problem for him, which is they're splitting the vote. The people who are not Ben McAdams are splitting the not McAdams vote. Now, Elevate Utah, they're lobbyists, and they are affiliated with the firm that is doing PR work for Ben McAdams. They're either the firm or affiliated with the firm that is doing PR work for Ben McAdams. So when he says that they're operatives for Ben McAdams, someone in their office is actually being paid by Ben McAdams to do the PR. So, he's not wrong there, but they've got a big reach. They've got a big platform. People pay attention to what they have to say, and it's hard for him to counter that. Now, Nate is going on national shows like Hassan Piker. He texted me today to let me know that Hassan Piker actually pulled up my article online. It turned into a couple of signups, which is nice. I mean, I appreciate the exposure, but there's only so many people in Utah who can vote for him who watch Hassan Piker. I know Nate would like to be on television. I know he would like to have that opportunity. I think that that's why he says those things about them, because he knows that it's a problem. Nathan Detroit says, being trilingual in Elvish, Klingon, and Dothraki has never felt like a waste of time. Wow. Well, here's my problem, Nathan. I have crippling ADHD, and so I get easily distracted. I have got an incredible dead hobbies closet for ADHD. Great story about this, and my wife knows me better than anybody on the planet. The other night, I was scrolling through social media, and I came across a guy who goes by the name of Jacques Zwipu. whipper, guy who has whips. And he's just cracking these whips incredibly loud. He's very good at what he does. Had this really cool Chinese whip that was a chain, loud as hell. Anyway, I'm watching this, and my wife, watching me, seeing me watch these and getting delighted by what I was seeing, she said to me, honey, I love you very much, but you cannot have a whip. You know? So she knows me very, very well. She knows me extremely well. So I'm glad that you're trilingual. I just don't have the attention span to do that sort of thing. I get very easily distracted. Someone says McAdams blew off the 71% town hall tonight. Screw him. I'm not there. I would have liked to have gone and see that, but I did see that he confirmed that he didn't want to, or he did not confirm that he was going to attend. And yes, I understand your frustration, but if you look at it from a political strategy standpoint, it makes sense, because he doesn't want to go on stage where he can let the other candidates tee off on him. It's the same strategy he had when he was at the televised debate. Right now, he thinks he's in the best position. Right now, McAdams probably, and again, I am not privy to his campaign strategy session, so this is just me looking at it from the outside. But I suspect he thinks that he's in a very good position heading into the election. And so what you do is you do whatever you can to minimize the possibility of a mistake. And if you show up on stage with your three opponents, even when it's a group like the 71% coalition, who's a very important group, you show up on stage, you're giving them an opportunity to tee off on you. And I think it's a risk-reward thing. There's more risk to him than reward for showing up at that. Not defending what he did, just explaining from a political strategy standpoint. If I were in McAdams' shoes, I also probably would not show up to really any debates. I mean, he just has to not lose right now. At least that's, I think, what he's thinking. Let's see. Joe Culbertson says Sim came and he actually did a lot to assuage some of the criticisms against his record. Yeah, he has got the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is very mad at Sim Gill, and that's why he was forced into a primary. I'll be fascinated to see how that primary works out, because I know that Republicans were very, very excited by the fact that he is being forced into a primary, or almost was taken out at the convention, because that is a seat the Republicans are targeting this year. They would really like to take over that seat, but that is going to be a very, very tough election. I wish I would have been there to see that, but I wouldn't be able to spend some time talking to y'all. Honest question, why are Phil Lyman supporters like Sophie, talking about Sophie Anderson and Michael Cera, so damn loyal to him 25 hours of the day on X? Well, Sophie Anderson is actually running his campaign. I just learned that this week when I was talking with his campaign communications person. Sophie Anderson is running his campaign, and that, to me, who as someone who has covered her for a long time, that is alarming, because Sophie Anderson is probably one of the most prominent election deniers here in Utah. She was part of a group, they went by this name, Two Red Pills, on social media. Two Red Pills right after the 2020 election, and they were alleging fraud in Utah and making up all sorts of fantastical stuff. I mean, Sophie Anderson and her partner, name is escaping me right now, they were deeply involved in the national Stop the Steal movement. If you remember the people from True the Vote, they had this big meeting, I believe it was down in Texas, where they called it the Pit. They were involved in that. It was an invite only of all the far-right wackadoodles who believed that the election fraud. The True the Vote guys actually got sued because they made some very untrue allegations about a small company in Minnesota. There's pictures of her riding on Mike Lindell's plane. He flew through Utah, picked her up, took her down to Vegas for a conference involving the constitutional sheriffs, which is a whole another thing that's for a whole nother part of this right-wing ecosystem. If you remember, she first came to prominence when a whole bunch of people got arrested for disrupting a Granite School District meeting over mask mandates. There was almost a near riot in this meeting, and a whole bunch of people got arrested for disturbing the peace, for disrupting the meeting, and that's where she first came into this. Phil sort of got pulled into her orbit through Steve Christiansen, the former legislator who was involved in this election denial stuff. Phil and Steve Christiansen went to Mike Lindell's cyber symposium in South Dakota, where they were supposed to show evidence of foreign governments hacking the election results. We never got those results, if you remember, but they went to that. Steve Christiansen got in some trouble. He used to be a top lawyer for the LDS Church, and he basically resigned suddenly from the legislature because he, as I reported, he used a PowerPoint advocating for a full forensic audit of the Salt Lake County election results. It was pretty clear if you look at the metadata that he used LDS Church resources to create that PowerPoint. And after I reported that story, I discovered that when I looked at the metadata, he quietly resigned or suddenly resigned from the legislature and quietly left his position at church headquarters. But yes, Sophie Anderson is running Phil's campaign, and as I said, I think Phil can actually win this election. And if he does, if he wins the primary, there's a very good chance he becomes a member of Congress. And it would logically flow that Sophie Anderson would be a paid member of his staff in Washington, D.C., or a district director back here, or whatever. So she would be on the government payroll. I don't know that for sure, but I do know that she is running his campaign. And knowing what I know about them and the crazy claims that they've made in the past, that should give everyone pause. I remember this was one of the funniest damn things I've ever seen in my life. On their Telegram channel, they posted pictures. They said that government black vans had come to their house and were snooping around the outside and cutting communications. And there was absolutely nothing to back that up, nothing at all, but they got all their followers whipped up that the government was coming for them and surveilling them, and it was probably just people working on the cable. Anyway, they made a whole bunch of crazy claims. Someone said, these are the same people who call Cox a communist and claim he stole the election from Lyman. Yes, they very much hate Spencer Cox, and they believe that they have evidence that the election was stolen. I don't think that that evidence holds up, but they're very good at taking a piece of information and then blowing it up beyond what it actually tells us. That should give everybody pause. That someone who rose to prominence here in Utah. I think she actually first came out because she was involved in some NIMBY lawsuit a few years ago. I think that's what I remember was Sophie Anderson. There was some sort of NIMBY issue, if I remember correctly. I think there was like a halfway home or that was going up in her neighborhood, and she really pushed back against that. So anyway, she ran Phil Lyman's campaign to run for Republican Party chair, which he almost won. And now she's running his congressional campaign. Someone says, even Trump hates Lyman. I don't think he has endorsed in this race yet. I would expect him to wade in and give his endorsements for the Utah races. If he did what he did in the past, he will probably endorse Celeste Malloy, which he did in 2024, and he'll probably endorse Blake Moore. And if that happens, it's going to be really hard for Lyman and Carrie Ann Lisenby to win. Not saying that they can, but it'll just be it'll make it even harder for them. Lyman tries to claim that the pardon he got from Trump at the end of Trump's first term in office, he's tried to turn that into a sort of tacit endorsement of him, even though in elections where he's actually been on the ballot, he's never been specifically endorsed by Trump. I don't know how to feel about this. And granted, I am not part of the community. But I'm sure you're aware that Governor Cox has declared June Fidelity Month rather than Pride Month. I don't like it because, as a student of history, as someone who has actually read books, I know the struggles that the LGBTQ plus community has gone through. Again, I am not a member of that community. I've been to Stonewall. I went there when I was in New York because I wanted to see it. I wanted to see this historical place. I know the struggles that they go through, and I can understand why people would be very angry that Spencer Cox, someone who up until a few years ago was a very strong ally, has changed and shifted and drifted to the right. He was the first governor, Republican governor, to make a Pride Month, or the first Republican governor to make a Pride Month declaration. And then he didn't issue one last year, and now he's declaring June as Fidelity Month, which is sort of a right-wing project to sort of erase Pride Month because, people get their feelings hurt because they can't let anybody else have anything. But I would, if I were a member of that community, again, I am not. And so I do not purport to speak on behalf of them. And it makes me uncomfortable to do that. But I know many people who are a member of that community, and I would feel insulted and disrespected if someone you had thought was an ally, someone who had given a very moving speech after the Pulse nightclub massacre at the Vigil in Salt Lake City, someone who has spent time with students who came to the Capitol and sat outside of his office for hours trying to get his attention to deliver a letter to him talking about some of the actions that the legislature was taking. This was when he was lieutenant governor. I would be very upset to see that. And so, again, just on first blush, as someone, again, who is not a member of that community, I would find that extremely disrespectful. And it's also just politically calculating. It's politically expedient for Cox to do that. Joe Culbertson says, there were a lot of Cox hate at Pride this weekend. He looks like he's betting on a red or Utah, and I'm not sure he's getting it, right? Well, he's not running for governor again. He's already said he will not run again in 2028. I don't know if he has eyes on higher office. I did see someone talking about this online. As we know that Senator John Curtis is eyeing a run for governor. And I've explained before why he probably will do it, and I think he would be remiss if he didn't run. It would be a free run. He's immediately a front runner. He'll have the resources he needs, and he's got a very good chance of winning. And somebody on social media said that, it just seems like there's a deal that Curtis is going to win and then give Cox his seat in the Senate. Well, that's a real calculated risk if that's what Cox is banking on, because Curtis doesn't get to pick. If hypothetically John Curtis wins governor in 2028, is inaugurated in 2029, he obviously would have to resign from the Senate. That vacancy, he would get to choose who fills that vacancy, but it's not up to him who the nominees are. It's up to the legislature. The entire legislature would nominate 3 Republicans to take his place, and he would have to pick one of them. And I don't know if Spencer Cox is one of those 3 people who would get put on that list. Maybe possibly, but I just don't know. Cox has got a book coming out. There's been some speculation that he's eyeing a run for president. He said that he's not doing that, but he's got this book coming out. I'm not sure what he's trying to do, but it certainly looks to me like he's eyeing something on the national stage. I mean, where do you go from governor? Is he hoping that Senator Mike Lee doesn't run for re-election when he comes up he'll be up in 2028. So Senator Mike Lee will be up in 2028. So maybe he runs for Mike Lee's seat. I don't know. But he's not running for governor, and maybe this is part of the calculation. But what it is it's going to be really hard to look like it's not just an absolute craven political move trying to curry favor with a Republican Party that has moved much farther to the right. As someone said, Cox was calculating on getting a red or Utah. I think originally he was calculating or leaning on the whole compassionate conservative thing. And that was all until the anti-woke stuff hit. And then he had to hit the brakes real hard. Remember, he was not a supporter of Donald Trump for years, and then he turned on a dime and endorsed him. Joe Culbertson says Cox will end up like Romney. The party is even further right now, so he's still a rhino. But Romney got elected. Romney got elected to the U.S. Senate, and he was the Republican presidential nominee. And there was a point where they thought he was going to win in 2012. against Barack Obama. It looked like it might be trending that way for a while. I don't know if Cox will ever get as close to that as Romney did. Romney, he decided he wasn't going to run again, and I don't blame him. I mean, you don't want to have any part of that anymore. So, Katie Did It on YouTube says he could have picked a different month. Ugly and hateful politics. It's part of a national trend. I mean, it's a national thing, and frankly, it's designed to be hurtful. It's designed to be hurtful. That's why they do it. That's why they did it this month. They know what Pride Month is, and it's just 100% designed to hurt feelings. That's why it's being pushed on a national level. They want to make people mad. They want to hurt feelings. They want to make people feel bad about things. And that's a shame. I mean, that's about all I can say about that. But again, I don't like it. And if I were a member of that community, I would feel very, very betrayed. Very betrayed. Especially after all of the years that you thought he was one of your supporters. I mean, the one thing, whenever he would talk about his Disagree Better initiative, he would always drag former Equality Utah Director Troy Williams out and just say, hey, Troy Williams, he comes to the Republican convention and he sits and he listens to people all the time. And that's his example of someone disagreeing better. But I always say, why is it always Troy Williams who has to disagree better with the Republicans by showing up at his place? Why can't Republicans come to Equality Utah events and listen? Not go there to troll, not go there to yell at people, not go there to wag your finger at them, but go there to listen. That's what Troy Williams was doing. He would go to he would get a booth at the Republican convention and he would listen to people. And there's just not a lot of reciprocation on that. And, I always thought that argument, Cox would always drag him out as an example, someone to hold up. And he's right to hold him up. But why is it that the example is someone who has to disagree better with those with the Republican Party rather than the Republicans trying to find the middle ground? That always rubbed me the wrong way. World Cup is starting on Thursday. Wearing my Scotland jersey here. We'll be excited to see how the Scots do. I'm not expecting big things from them, but watch the World Cup. I started off the show. A couple things I want to bring up again as we finish up here. The first thing is we're having a contest for my paying subscribers, and it is the primary election pick'em. And it's just what it sounds like. If you're a paying subscriber, you can get in on this contest and pick the winners of all 24 congressional and legislative primary elections on the ballot. I've got a form up. You get to pick the winner. The person who picks the most winners wins. What do you win? Well, you're going to get a trophy. And then I'm going to take the winner to lunch at the moderately priced restaurant of their choice. So you get a trophy and you get lunch with me. That's what's going to happen for the winner. Plus, you'll get the bragging rights. And that's for paying subscribers. So if you go over to the website, utahpolitics.news, you can get in on that if you are a paying subscriber to the site. You have to fill out your entry form before the polls close on the 23rd. The other thing is, as you know, I have a standing invitation to any elected official if they want to support women's sports, because, there's been a lot of saber rattling, a lot of demagoguing about supporting women's sports, the sanctity of women's sports, saving women's sports. I've got a standing invitation for any member, any elected official who wants to actually go and support women's sports. I'll go with you. Let's go to a Royals game. Let's go to a Utah Talent softball match. Well, I have a taker. Representative Clint Okerlund has graciously accepted. And it looks like we're going to probably be going to the Royals match on July 29th against Washington. Going to go see some Trin Rodman in town. And I am trying to see if there is a way that maybe I can have the Royals set aside a block of tickets for other people who are in the audience or subscribers or readers of Utah Political Watch to join us at the pitch, where we're going to have some fun, watch soccer, and maybe talk some politics. I'll get a chance to talk with you, get a chance to talk with Representative Okerlund, and I think that it could be fun. So stay tuned for that. I just think it'd be a really fun thing to go do. So hopefully there's going to be an opportunity for members of the audience to join us, a limited number. You'll probably have to pay your own way Tickets are not that expensive to the Utah Royals anyway, and they're playing really well right now. So hopefully we can make that work. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you so much for your attention. It is greatly appreciated. If you appreciate what I do, if you want to support what I do, go to my website, utahpolitics.news. You can become a paid subscriber, throw some dollars in the tip jar. All of that goes to make more live streams like this possible, my reporting possible, podcasts like this possible, all of that stuff. It's reader supported, no corporations, no billionaires. It's all funded by readers. And I'm very thankful that there are people out there who want to support what I do as an independent journalist. But again, thank you so much for your time and attention. If anything breaks, we'll have another live stream this week. And for paying subscribers, I'm going to be sending out tomorrow an RSVP for our subscriber-only live stream. It's been too long since we've done it, and I figured out some technical issues to make that happen. Other than that, we'll be back next week at this time for another regular live stream. And then make sure to join me on election night, where we're going to be going over the election results live online, talking about what happens as these election results roll in the primary elections, and I'm trying to line up a few guests as well. So until then, have a great evening, everybody. Thank you for your time and attention. It has been fantastic, and we will talk to you again soon. Have a great evening, everybody.